I'm happy to be with you again. I have been there at the time when the club was inaugurated. And this was an idea I had thought of to bring our young students to get interested in the civil services. It is never too early to prepare for the civil service examination. Because what this examination tests is not just what you learned a few months or a few years before the examination. What it tests is also not a syllabus as such, but everything that you have done from your birth to the day of the examination comes into play. Your background, your kind of education, the kind of interest that your parents and your teachers have taken in you, and how much they have inspired you to take this decision. The decision has to be yours, but that decision should be followed by a dream. So this is something that you have to commit yourself completely. So we thought of this idea so that even at an early stage, when you are in the early stages of your degree, you get interested so that by the time you take the examination, you'll be fully prepared for it. I have already spoken to the group about the various aspects of the examination. My colleagues also have done. So I will not go into the technicalities of it. One bit about is a strategy. So what is the first strategy that you have to have? First and foremost, it is the English language. Because even though the examination can be taken in Malayalam or any other language, most of our candidates from Kerala take this examination in English. There are some people who have done it in Malayalam and got through, but very few, because we do not have enough materials in Malayalam to prepare for the examination. So I presume that most of you will take the examination in English. If that is the case, the first step is for you to master the English language. Spoken, written, reading, everything. And that you can start very early. Of course, we have some confusion about medium of instruction in colleges. It is supposedly English, but very little English is used in most of the colleges, I understand. So you do not have much opportunity to speak in English or to understand English very well. Of course, there are exceptions, but generally. So the first thing that we have to do is to focus on your language. And if you think your language is good, your writing is good, your speaking style is good, then you can go on to acquiring knowledge for the purpose. But I said this at the very beginning, because without proficiency in the English language, you may not be able to succeed in civil service examination. Then, of course, you know very well that there's 3 stages: the preliminary examination, the mains examination, and the personality test. I'm sure you already know about it. Probably you also know something about the syllabus. The preliminary examination is something like choice questions. You have to choose, like Ningalkamagam Kodishwaran style of questions. The answers all look correct, but you have to get the most significant answer to every question. And that about 10 lakhs of students take the examination every year. And out of that, only 15,000 are selected for the mains examination. And mains examination have general studies papers. It has a optional subject, and it has an English examination and a Malayalam examination. So totally about 9 papers you have to do. So there you have to remember is that you have to choose an optional subject into 2 papers, and that you have to make a choice when the time comes. Then out of that, they select something like 5,000 candidates and invite them to Delhi for an interview. Probably you know this year interviews have not been completed. The results should have come by now, but because of COVID-19, many of the candidates were not able to travel to New Delhi. And so this is going to start anytime now when the planes start flying. And then only, so the whole system, whole pattern of the time frame is changing. And the 2020 prelims examination, which had taken place in May, is now going to take place in October. So by the time the results come for the 2020, it will be next year. So everything will be delayed, even after the situation comes back to normal. One thing that we have to remember is we do not know when it will come back to normal. Now, most people are saying that we have to live with COVID, not to look at a world without COVID, but we learn to live with it, is the advice that we are getting. So what we are doing today is also part of that, because we do not know when we'll to meet each other, or when I can visit your college, or when you can come to our academy, or anything like that. But at the same, we cannot stop education. So that is why these webinars and regular classes that we have started online. So those who are interested can in fact register online straight away, because we already started the classes yesterday for those who want to take the examination the next 1 or 2 years. So talking of strategy, the first thing that you have to do is to make a quick calculation and see when you will be able to take this examination. For that, you should know, of course, what the qualifications are. Only 2 qualifications you need to take this examination. You must be a graduate and you must be 21 years old. It is from 21 to 32, you take this examination. When I took this examination many, many years ago, it was only 2 chances between 21 and 23. But today it is between 21 and 32. So you have a longer period of preparation. But the earlier you join, the better, because that many more years you get in the service. And therefore, what I would suggest is you quickly calculate as to which year you will complete 21 years and you would have graduated. This is the minimum. But this examination is basically supposed to be at the postgraduate level. So many of us during my generation, none of us went to the examination without master's degree. But these days, the trend is for young people who have done their bachelor's degree, like even engineering or medicine and history or art or whatever, they spend 1 or 2 years preparing for it without going to a master's class, but through an academy like the NSS Academy, and then take the examination. If you don't make it in the first chance, you make it in the second chance. Not necessary to go beyond that. But that's a whole year. Once you start your prelims, then you have the mains examination. By the interview is over, it's about 15 months you would have spent. And in the academy, we take you through these 15 months and make sure that you get the right education, but the effort has to be yours. So you will know today that when you are eligible to do that, depending on your age, your class you have reached, you will know when you will be a graduate and when will you have be 21 years old. And that you put it on your wall or somewhere and register that that is the year I'm going to take this examination. And then you have to count down. How many years do I have? And then you have to make a timetable. Even if the examination is coming only 3 years later or 4 years later, you have to make a timetable as to what you will do between now and that date. Of course, you have to pass your graduation, and the better degree that you have, the better. And then you can even go for master's degree to be more equipped, and then you can take the examination accordingly. But if you are more adventurous, more ambitious, you can even do it after bachelor's degree, and on that basis you can do that. So once you determine the time that you have, then you have to make a timetable. how many months you will do this and how many months you will do that, etc., etc. So that is the first thing. But I'm not going to go into specifics of the examination, presuming that all of you know it. But after I have spoken on the topic that I've been asked to speak, then maybe if you have any specific questions, I can answer. And also my colleagues will also be coming and they will give you a pattern. So what I have been asked to speak to you is about the relevance of international affairs for this examination. How much international affairs should you know to pass this exam? It is only for the mains examination, it's only part of a general studies paper. So there are only 8 items in international affairs in the mains examination. In the preliminary examination, there is no syllabus, so they can ask you any question, anything relating to international affairs. So first of all, for the prelims examination, you must have an overall view of international affairs, number one. Secondly, what is the relevance of foreign policy in international affairs? Thirdly, the topics they have mentioned. For example, they have said India and her neighbors. That is a subject. Or India and international organizations like the United Nations. Another one is India and the diaspora. That means Indian communities abroad. Then international institutions financing like the World Bank, the IMF, etc. So like this, there are some specific topics which you have to prepare. But for the prelims, a general reading of the newspapers every day, which I think I have told you already. I've circulated a paper called The First Steps. I hope you all have it. So there what you need to do is, if you have not started it, start from today and read a newspaper, any newspaper, but I recommend the Hindu because it is very good comprehensive coverage of everything, including international affairs. So that is what you need to do from today. Read newspapers and take down notes on international affairs, on national affairs, on sports, everything that you find in the newspapers. What you do not know, you take. Is there any problem? Are you able to hear me? Hello? Hello? Okay, is that now better? Can somebody say whether you can hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear
Hello?
you. Sir, please continue.
Okay,
we
but
can hear you.
In between, I got cut off, right?
No, sir, no, sir. It's okay.
No?
Everything fine now.
You could hear me all through? I
Yes,
don't
sir,
have to
yes.
repeat anything.
No, sir, no, sir.
Okay.
Please, please.
So I was talking about reading newspapers in order to understand international affairs, and which I presume you all follow. Like, for example, we are now going through a most difficult time in our foreign policy with regard to our neighbors. I'll come to some details about that. But neighbors, India's relationship with our neighbors, particularly China, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Bhutan, Myanmar, all these are very important in your examination. Then there are some technical words. When you talk about foreign policy, somebody may ask you, what is peaceful coexistence? Or what is peacekeeping operations? So these kind of technical words relating to the foreign affairs, what is Gujarat Doctrine? These things you have to learn for the preliminary examination. So this is a general awareness of any educated person will know about foreign policy. But once you pass the preliminary examination, then international affairs figure in paper 2, or what is called the general studies paper. That paper has other subjects also, But there will be at least 5 or 6 questions about which you have to write essays, which means you must know the subject very, very well. Of course, some people take international affairs as an optional paper. If you do that, then you have to study even more. But that's not a popular subject because the syllabus is very big. So people don't normally take international affairs. They take history or sociology or philosophy, history, which you can read. So presuming that your optional subject is not international affairs, in your general paper, you have to answer questions about foreign policy matters. For example, India-US relations. You could have a question like that. You could have a question about what is the relationship between India and Russia today. Because China is very dominant. That could be there. So when you join the academy or when you prepare yourself for it, you will have to look at the syllabus and find the material. A lot of material is available on the net. Not like when I took this examination. There was only a newspaper to read. There was nothing else. There was no internet. Or we go to the library and dig through the books and read. But now it is much easier because information is at your fingertips. You write India-US relations, you can get 1,000 pages. It's only a matter of having too much of it. Which one to read and which one not to read. So this is the pattern that you have in the mains examination. And then at the interview stage, the personality test stage. And there also, there will be many questions on foreign policy, international relations, because on the board, the interview board, which normally has about 5 members, one will be a foreign service officer, someone like me, will be there on the board. And his job is to basically ask you questions about international relations, the current matters relating to that. And these are all that you need to do in international affairs in the examination. But every other subject is also there. Science, technology, history, everything is there in all these papers. So since I'm talking to you about importance of international affairs, I'd like to stress that everything that happens in the country has a foreign policy relevance. Everything has a connection with foreign policy because the objective of foreign policy is the same as the objective of internal policy. Why do you say that? Because one of the objectives of foreign policy is to ensure that there is peace and tranquility around us. Because for development, you need to have peace. You agree, no? Because without peace, and if you have to have a war with China or Pakistan every other day, we cannot develop at all. So foreign policy's job is to make sure that we don't go to war. For that, you need to have good relationships with countries. If a country is like an adversary, like China today is an adversary, how do you deal with it? For that, what kind of friends you can have? What kind of army you can have? What kind of defense structures you can have? All these to be decided by foreign policy experts. The second reason why we need a foreign policy is that no country in the world is self-sufficient. Even the most rich country in the world. Of course, today is an exceptional situation when the richest country in the world has become the poorest, as it were. The things are happening in America or the United States is unthinkable. Millions of people have lost their jobs. Thousands of people have lost their lives. And with all the wealth that they have, they are not able to provide security for its people. Today they have to run around buying masks buying medications. The whole world used to go to America for treatment. But now India is sending them medicines to fight COVID-19. So it's an exceptional situation. And therefore that highlights very well that no country can be entirely self-sufficient. We need resources from other people. In this particular time, of course, it is much more important than other times. That you need support, somebody has to find a vaccine. Who is going to do that? Somebody has to find a medicine, effective medicine. We don't have either of the two for COVID-19. So international cooperation is very important. And no country can be self-sufficient by itself. Look at the Middle East, look at the Gulf countries. They're very rich, they have plenty of oil. But they need Indians. They need Malayalis, 9 million of them, working there day and night for their country. Look at America, even in the normal times. Their technology is completely in the hands of the Indians. Most of the teachers, doctors, engineers, they are the ones who built up the United States of America. So how do you do that? Which means that you have to give attention to every country in the world, and you must have good relations with all of them, because you never know when you need someone's help. And you must also be ready to give your help to the others. And that is where foreign policy matters. Because if you are not in good terms with these countries, what you need most, you will not get. So you have to have goodwill, you have to have exchange of ideas. So when you are a diplomat in a foreign country, what you do first is to look for what you need from that country. And you get nothing free. And you have to find out also what you can offer to them. And this is what is called negotiations. You try to give what you can afford to give, and try to get as much as you can from the others. And so that is the challenge, and that is why foreign policy is important. So foreign policy is as much important for development as internal policy. Unfortunately, we have had good cooperation from many countries in the past. When India became independent in 1947, the world was divided into two blocks. The Western Bloc, led by the United States, and the Eastern Bloc, led by the Soviet Union, United Union of the Soviet Socialist Republics, which is now Russia. So we had a choice of either joining Russia or joining America, and we decided not to join either of them. And that is why what is called the non-aligned movement was born. And the person who created the non-aligned movement and non-alignment was, of course, our first Prime Minister, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru, who said, I will not join either of the power blocks, American or Russian. I'll stand in the middle and I'll take decisions in its own merit and not forced by others. That is how non-aligned movement was born. And many countries which became independent after we became independent joined the non-aligned movement. Today there are more than 100 countries who are non-aligned. So throughout the history of India, we always remained independent of power blocks and other agencies, and we have decided to remain non-aligned. And the word for non-aligned today is strategic autonomy, in the sense that when you do something for your own security, your own development, you have autonomy in the sense that you are not dependent on anybody else. You may decide to seek help from one or the other, but that is your own decision, not somebody else's decision. So in these 75 years or so that we have been independent, we have faced many, many challenges. First, of course, was the economic challenge. Then there was the problem about our neighbors and our borders. Within 2 years, no, not even, within 1 year of our independence, we had to fight a war with Pakistan on Kashmir. In 1962, Chinese aggression took place, and we had to fight with China. Then later in 1965, we had to have a war with Pakistan because they sent infiltrators into Kashmir. In 1971, again, we had to fight a war with Pakistan because of Bangladesh. And Bangladesh today is an independent country. And problems come one after the other on the border. So many issues come up. Fortunately, we never had a pandemic. We never had an epidemic of the kind that we are facing today. This is the first time that, at least in my lifetime, I'm seeing for the first time something like this. It happens. We have heard about the plague. Once in about 100 years, these things happen. And the world wars, 2 world wars we have already fought. So in all these, for you to remain independent and protect your country and develop your country is the challenge. And the main responsibility for all this will come to the young people who are today taking this examination. Because if you join one of the services, whether it is IAS or IFS or IPS or many others, you are going to be at the lead fighters in all these issues. Look at the role the police is playing in health matters today. IPS was not supposed to deal with such things. District collectors used to sit in their ivory towers and give orders. But what do we see today? District collectors are walking around, making sure that everybody observes the law and everybody gets what the basic needs. And things will get only worse. So, when you join a civil service, you will be in the lead. You can't stand back. You will be dealing with people of your parents' age. Those will be working with you in your office. All of them will be older than your parents. So what gives you that authority? What gives you that importance? And that is only this examination. So once you pass this examination, you change. Not the same boy and girl that you are today. The world will look at you differently. Your family will look at you differently. You will look at the world differently. And for 37 to 40 years, you will be at the most important places in the administration. As you grow old, you get more salaries and more benefits. But the work is as crucial as an assistant collector, as the Cabinet Secretary of India. All of them have very heavy responsibilities. And that is the reason why we need to understand the world very well. You need to understand the country very well. And what is the way to do it? Read, understand. So I would suggest 2 books you must read if you are going to take this examination. Both by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. One is called The Discovery of India, and the other is called The Glimpses of World History. How did you write these books when you were so busy with the freedom struggle? Then you were so busy looking after the country. But he was able to do that because he was in jail a lot of times. Now with the lockdown, we know what is it to be in a jail. All of us spent at least 3 to 4 months virtually in prison, didn't you? Because you had everything to eat, you had everything to drink, you had the internet, you had the television, you have your parents. But all of you must have felt that this is not life. If you can't see your friends, you cannot travel. I was on a plane most of the time, all my life. This is the first time that for 4 months I have not entered a plane or I have not seen a hotel. So it's not normal life. But Pandit Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi were in jail not because of COVID, but because of the British put them in jail. And that is the time when you become a writer, a singer, a dancer, or whatever. And Pandit Nehru spent that time writing about India. What is India? India is so diverse. If you look at a person from Punjab, you don't even look like each other. We are in the same country. He won't know your language. He would have studied something else. So like that, we have so many languages, so many cultures, so many diversities. But India has remained India 75 years. We have our problems, yes. So Pandit Nehru explains in this book how to discover India. What is common between a Keralite or a Malayali, and a Kashmiri? Is there anything common? Not much. But Kashmiri will be as proud of India as a Keralite is. And that is what he explains. Unity in diversity. We keep all our diversity. Look at Kerala. How many religions have come through Kerala? How many languages have come? Everybody came from the south. And then they conquered India. Partly our mistake because we welcomed all of them. Some of them lived here peacefully, but others conquered us. So we have multifaceted nation. And we all swear by India. When a war occurs in Kashmir or on the China border as it happened, who is the colonel who died? He is not from Ladakh. He is not from Jammu and Kashmir. From Telangana. Why did a Telangana man lose his life for the country in Kashmir, in Ladakh? Don't you have to know? When people want to die in South India in the old days, they would just walk to the Ganges, to Ganga river. They may not have even seen Ganga river, but in their mind and their heart, that is where they would like to die. So, the idea of India is what binds us all together. India's culture, India's history, India's the Vedas, the Puranas, the Upanishads. And this is what he explains in Discovery of India in simple language. Then the second book he wrote was called Glimpses of World History. Because every responsible human being should know what is the history of the world. How have we reached this situation in India? Where did we all come from? And what are the various changes that took place? How many wars have we fought? How many kingdoms have been established? How many monarchies ruled over India? All this he explains in very simple language for us. In fact, these were written for his daughter. It was a father's letters to his daughter, to Indira Gandhi later. So if you read these two books, you will understand India and the world. And that's a must. Of course, you must read as many books as possible. But at least these two, you must prepare so that you have a solid background of what you have to do in the examination. I think the time is running out, so I'll just say a few words about the current crisis in India-China relations, very briefly. It will take me one whole day to explain all this to you. What is the basic problem between India and China? Simple. There is no border between us. When I say no border, there is no border recognized by both of us. There's a problem. You build fences around your house, don't you? Your neighbor may not attack you, but you still need a fence to know where your world is and where it ends and where the other person's land is. But what happened was, the border that existed in the past, China does not recognize it. And therefore, what we have is what is called a line of actual control. There is no line on the map. If you go to that area, there is no way to find out who lives, what is China, what is India. You cannot even find out. But we go only up to the place where we think it is India. And they come only up to the place where they think it is China. But by mistake, you can cross over. And when you can cross over, you think, why don't I take a few more kilometers of India? India does not want it. We don't want anybody's land. But China is an expansionist country. They want to have more land, more influence. So they will come and put up some tents, put an office, bring some animals, or bring some equipment, and occupy a part of our place. For a long time, we won't even know because there's nobody there. And when Indian patrol, Indian policemen or Indian military go there, they find that Chinese are sitting there. So first we tell them, please go, this is not your land. Then they will argue with you. And sometimes there is confrontation, conflict, as it happened on the 16th of this month. When the Chinese had come there, we didn't fight with them. We said, this is a problem, this is our land, please go away. They didn't. Then we talked at the diplomatic level, at the military level, and finally they were convinced that they were in the wrong place. So they agreed to withdraw. So the government of India said, the Chinese are withdrawing, and they were withdrawing. And that was the time Colonel Santosh went there to see that the Chinese are withdrawing, and they had a friendly conversation. And in the middle of it, the Chinese soldiers attacked them, not with guns, because guns are not allowed. But they were brutally killed. 20 soldiers and 23 together, or 17 and 3 soldiers were killed in cold blood by the Chinese. We say we have killed about 40 of them. We don't know. The Chinese have never accepted that. But anyway, fortunately now, there is no direct confrontation. And the Prime Minister has told us that all our land is safe as of now. But if there is another effort, another trial of force by the Chinese, we will be very strongly protesting and we'll be ready to take action. So this happened in 1962, then it happened in 1967, then it happened in 1993, then it happened in 2017, and now in 2020. How long can you accept that? The answer is to decide where the line is. Where is the border? And the Chinese don't accept any arguments. They want an open border so that they can come and attack you. So now we have to start another conversation, try to resolve the problem. Because you must have heard many people saying, let us boycott China. Let's not buy these phones. All of you have phones which are made in China, I know. How do you throw it away? So that is only an emotional thing. Oh, Chinese, we don't like the Chinese, so I throw away my phone. But who will be hurt, Chinese or you? So you cannot boycott China. It's a neighboring country. They are able to sell you things cheaper than what we can make. But at the same time, we must become self-reliant. Atmanirbhar, as the Prime Minister would say. So what is our strategy? Is to become self-reliant. As much as possible, we should not depend on China. And then that happens, we'll be stronger. We'll be able to get what we want. Of course, we have a problem with Nepal, but that is not so serious. Nepal thinks that part of Nepal was with us, so they are so showing that it is their land. But you will sit with them and talk to them. I don't think that'll be a big problem. The Pakistan problem remains because of Kashmir. I have no time to explain what the Kashmir issue is, but I presume that most of you know. So I was giving you a sample of the kind of issues that you have to prepare and learn and understand for this examination. So just as physics, chemistry, history, biology, everything is important in this examination. International affairs are also important. And the best way to understand international affairs is to read newspapers. If you read a newspaper like the Hindu, you cannot miss anything. But if it's not enough, if you just read it like you normally read a newspaper, you must take down notes, and those notes should remain with you. So that 2 years from now or 3 years from now, when the time comes, you can go back to your notebooks and refresh your memory. So I'm so glad that so many of you have joined the Civil Service Club. This academy in Trivandrum was set up for NSS institutions because the General Secretary, Sri Sukumaran Nair, felt that more people belong to the NSS must become our administrators. We already have many. Every year we have at least 10 of them passing out of the academy. But we don't have enough students. More and more people should come. The competition should increase. And that is why all these teachers in different colleges have become coordinators of the club. They used to ask us, can you come and teach us in Pandalam, Changanasheri, etc., etc. That was not possible. But now an opportunity has come because now we have online classes. We never had online classes. We just started it. So it doesn't matter now where you live. You can still join the Trivandrum Academy. Spend one Sunday forenoon. That's all that you need. 2 hours every Sunday. If you do it for 2 years, by the time you graduate, you will be ready to prepare for the main examination. Yesterday, we invited all of you to sign in and watch. And I gave a 2-hour lecture. Not these things, but about the examination and so on. So my expectation is that even if Corona goes away, we can continue the online education. Because online education has great advantages. You can sit at home and study. And you can see the teacher, you can use the technology. So even if life becomes normal, we can continue with your course if there are enough people. So this is a blessing in disguise. Don't we say Urvashi Shabam Upakaram? So it has become an Upakaram. We can prepare for the civil service sitting anywhere, even on the moon. You will be able to follow. So think about all this. And if you think it is worth it, I think the teachers should also encourage you to join this course. And frankly, this is not a commercial organization. NSS, as you know, is a social organization. So we only collect as many fees as necessary for the teachers. I don't take any salary, several others don't. So we do it as a service. But we need to pay the teachers. We need to run the institution. We need to have the internet. So a small amount of money is collected. And that will be very helpful. So my point was that this online education is going to be good for you. And as many of you as possible should join it. I think I've talked too much already. It's 3:30, I think. But if you have time, then we can talk on anything that you would like to hear from me, any advice you need, any doubts you have, any clarifications you need. We can do that for a few minutes. Thank you very much.